Commander Zixthara stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the strange new species through her sensors. Her crystalline body reflected the blue light from the displays as she studied the humans below. They moved around a field of floating rocks in space using metal ships that looked simple and crude. The humans called these rocks asteroids and seemed very interested in breaking them apart. The Kethver commander had seen many species in her long career, but none quite like these. Humans. They had only recently learned to travel between stars, and their technology seemed hundreds of years behind what civilized races used. Yet something about them made her curious. They worked with a precision that suggested intelligence, even if their tools were basic. Captain Jake Morrison commanded the human fleet from a ship called UES Liberty. Zixthara watched him through her screens as he moved around his bridge, giving orders to his crew. He was shorter than most species she knew, and had no natural armor or weapons. His skin was soft and pink and looked very fragile. Yet he carried himself with confidence that seemed odd for such a weak creature. The humans had been working in this asteroid field for 3 weeks. They used devices that shot metal chunks at the rocks to break them into smaller pieces. Then other ships came to collect the broken pieces and take them away. It was mining, but done in the most primitive way Zixthara had ever seen. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Brooks coordinated the mining teams with calm efficiency. She spoke into her communication device, and ships moved to new positions around different asteroids. The humans worked together like they had done this many times before. Each person knew their job and did it without confusion or delay. Chief Engineer Ben Carter supervised the weapons that broke the rocks. Zixthara found it amusing that the humans called them weapons when they were clearly just tools. The devices shot heavy metal pieces using magnetic fields to give them speed. When the metal hit the rocks, they shattered into fragments that could be easily collected. What made Zixthara curious was how casual the humans seemed about everything. They knew alien ships were watching them. Her scouts had been observing for days, and the humans had definitely noticed. Yet they continued their work without fear or aggression. Most new species either ran away when they met the galactic enforcement fleet or tried to attack with whatever weapons they had. Commander Vextol approached Zixthara with a report from the tactical department. He was young and arrogant like many junior officers and clearly found the humans amusing. According to his analysis, the human ships had no energy shields, no plasma weapons, and no defensive systems that could stop even the weakest galactic military vessel. The human weapons were particularly funny to Vextol. They were essentially metal, throwing devices that used ancient kinetic principles instead of modern energy technology. Any civilized species had learned long ago that energy weapons were superior, because they could be focused precisely and had unlimited ammunition as long as power was available. Dr. Hethwen, the science officer, had been studying human technology through passive scans. She reported that while the humans showed some interesting engineering approaches, their military capabilities were essentially zero by galactic standards. Their ships were basically flying metal boxes with simple engines and basic life support systems. Yet Zixthara noticed something that her officers missed. The humans moved their ships with surprising skill. Their formations were precise and their coordination was excellent. When they needed to adjust position around an asteroid, they did so smoothly and efficiently. This suggested training and discipline that went beyond what primitive miners should possess. Captain Morrison seemed especially interesting to watch. He never appeared worried or confused even when making difficult decisions. When problems arose, with equipment or positioning, he solved them quickly and moved on to the next task. His crew responded to his orders immediately and without question, showing respect that had to be earned over time. The human weapons specialist, Rick Turner, operated the rock-breaking devices with careful attention to detail. Each shot was calculated and precise, hitting exactly where it needed to create the best fracture pattern. The humans wasted no ammunition and made no mistakes. For primitive beings, they showed remarkable competence. Dr. Helen Ross, the human science officer, spent much time looking at her instruments. Zixthara assumed she was analyzing the asteroids to find the best mining locations, but sometimes Ross seemed to be looking in directions where there were no rocks. This made Zixthara wonder what else the human scientist might be studying. The asteroid field itself was large and complex, with thousands of rocks floating in a loose cluster. Some were small like boulders, while others were massive enough to have their own gravity. The humans had chosen their working area, carefully picking rocks that were valuable but also safe to approach. Commander Amy Nelson, the human tactical officer, maintained watch on the surrounding space. She reported regularly to Captain Morrison about ship positions and potential hazards. Her attention to detail suggested the humans took security seriously even during peaceful mining operations. After watching for several more hours, Zixthara decided the humans were harmless but potentially useful. They clearly had resources and technology that, while primitive, might be valuable for trade. Their disciplined approach to work suggested they could be reliable partners if properly managed. The decision to make contact seemed obvious. These humans were new to space and needed guidance from more advanced species. The Galactic Enforcement Fleet existed partly to help primitive races understand their place in the larger universe. Zixthara would offer protection and trade opportunities in exchange for tribute and cooperation. She ordered her communications officer to send a standard first contact message to the human fleet. The translation computers would handle the language barrier, and diplomatic protocols would ensure a peaceful introduction. Zixthara expected the humans to be grateful for contact with a superior civilization. The message went out across space toward the U's Liberty, carrying greetings from the Kethver people and an invitation to discuss mutual cooperation. Zixthara settled back to wait for the human response, confident that this would be another routine encounter with a primitive species, eager to learn from their betters. Captain Jake Morrison received the alien message with calm professionalism that surprised Zixthara. Most primitive species either panicked or became aggressive when first contacted by advanced civilizations. Instead, Morrison gathered his senior officers and responded within an hour with a carefully worded diplomatic message. The human captain introduced his species as recent travelers to the stars, who were interested in peaceful relationships with other intelligent life. He thanked Zixthara for making contact and expressed hope that humans and Kethver could find common ground for cooperation. His words were polite but not submissive, which Zixthara found mildly annoying. When Zixthara asked about human military capabilities, Morrison was refreshingly honest. He explained that humanity had only basic defensive systems and used simple kinetic weapons for mining and construction work. He called them tools rather than weapons and seemed genuinely puzzled why anyone would consider them threatening. Sub-Commander Vextal found this extremely amusing. During the private staff meeting after the first exchange, he openly laughed at human technology. He compared their metal-throwing devices to stone axes and wooden clubs used by primitive cave dwellers. The idea that any modern species would still use kinetic projectiles struck him as hilariously backward. Dr. Hethwin agreed with Vextal's assessment, but was more diplomatic in her language. She noted that while humans showed promising engineering skills, their military applications were centuries behind galactic standards. Their ships had no energy shields, particle beam weapons, or quantum defensive systems that civilized warfare required. The tactical analysis was even more damning. Human vessels appeared to be converted cargo ships and mining platforms with basic armor and simple propulsion systems. They carried no missiles, no plasma cannons, and no antimatter torpedoes. Against even a single Kethver destroyer they would be helpless. Zixthara requested a demonstration of human mining techniques, partly from curiosity and partly to better understand their capabilities. Morrison agreed immediately and invited the aliens to observe their operations. This openness convinced Zixthara that humans had nothing to hide because they had nothing worth hiding. The demonstration took place near a large asteroid that the humans had marked for processing. Captain Morrison explained their procedure while Lisa Brooks coordinated the mining teams. Ben Carter prepared the kinetic impactor while Rick Turner calculated the optimal firing solution. The human weapon was essentially a magnetic acceleration tube that launched dense metal projectiles at moderate velocity. When the tungsten slug hit the asteroid, it transferred kinetic energy and created fractures that split the rock into manageable pieces. The process was effective but seemed incredibly crude to alien observers. Vextel made jokes during the demonstration about humans still living in the Stone Age. He pointed out that Kepler plasma miners could vaporize the same asteroid in seconds while human methods took several minutes per rock. The difference in efficiency was so vast it seemed almost sad. Dr. Hethwin studied the human technique with scientific interest. She admitted the kinetic approach had certain advantages like simplicity and reliability, but noted that energy-based tools were far superior for precision work. Humans seemed to use kinetic force for everything like primitive beings who only understood hitting things with rocks. What the aliens failed to notice was how carefully the humans observed their reactions. Dr. Helen Ross monitored alien communications, while Commander Amy Nelson tracked their ship movements. Rick Turner recorded detailed scans of alien vessels during the demonstration while pretending to focus on asteroid targeting. Captain Morrison maintained friendly conversation with Zixthara throughout the demonstration, but his questions were more sophisticated than they initially appeared. He asked about galactic trade routes, defensive technologies, and common military practices. His curiosity seemed natural for a new species but covered remarkably specific topics. The aliens were happy to share information because they saw no possible threat from humans. Zixthara explained how civilized species protected their territories, using energy shields that could deflect any kinetic attack. She described plasma weapons that could slice through metal, like paper, and antimatter bombs that could destroy entire fleets. Vextel bragged about Kethver military superiority and how their defensive systems made them nearly invulnerable to primitive attacks. He explained that energy shields worked by dispersing incoming force across wide areas until the energy dissipated harmlessly. No kinetic weapon could penetrate such defenses. Dr. Hethwin added technical details about how modern warfare had evolved beyond simple projectile weapons. She described quantum targeting systems that could track multiple enemies simultaneously and particle beam arrays that could destroy targets at incredible distances. Kinetic weapons were museum pieces from ancient history. Meanwhile, aboard human ship's crew members quietly analyzed everything they learned. Chief Science Officer Dr. Ross compiled data about alien shield frequencies and energy patterns. Weapons Specialist Turner studied tactical formations and defensive positioning. Navigator Dan Cooper mapped alien ship capabilities and potential weaknesses. The humans asked innocent questions about galactic politics and military organization. Morrison wanted to know which species were strongest and how conflicts were typically resolved. His interest seemed natural for someone trying to understand his place in a complex universe. Zixthara found herself enjoying the conversation despite human primitiveness. Morrison was intelligent and thoughtful even if his technology was laughably outdated. She began to think humans might make useful junior partners once they accepted proper guidance from superior species. The demonstration concluded with humans successfully processing 3 large asteroids while aliens watched and commented. Zixthara complimented their efficiency while privately noting how much faster the same work could be done with proper tools. She offered to provide modern mining equipment in exchange for exclusive trading rights. Morrison politely declined the offer, saying humans preferred to develop their own solutions to problems. He thanked Zixthara for her generous proposal but suggested they start with smaller cooperation projects before making major commitments. This independence surprised Zixthara, who expected eagerness to acquire advanced technology. The meeting ended. Both sides agreed to continue discussions about possible partnerships. Zixthara planned to gradually convince humans they needed alien protection and guidance. Morrison promised to consult with human leadership about future cooperation while carefully avoiding any binding agreements. The aliens departed confident they had discovered another primitive species ripe for easy domination. The humans continued their mining work while quietly preparing for possibilities their new friends had not considered. Both sides looked forward to their next meeting, but for very different reasons. 3 weeks after first contact, Captain Morrison sent a formal diplomatic message to Commander Zixthara requesting a meeting to discuss territorial boundaries and trade agreements. The human captain suggested a neutral location in open space, away from both human mining operations and Kethver patrol routes. His tone remained polite and professional. Zixthara was pleased by the human initiative. Most primitive species needed significant encouragement before accepting the inevitable reality of their situation. Morrison seemed more intelligent than average and would probably recognize the benefits of Kethver protection without requiring demonstrations of superior firepower. The meeting location was chosen carefully in an empty region of space several light hours from any major stellar bodies. No asteroids or planets cluttered the area, and long-range sensors could detect approaching ships from vast distances. Both sides agreed the neutral ground would prevent misunderstandings and ensure peaceful negotiations. Zixthara brought 12 ships from her enforcement fleet, including her flagship, and 2 heavy cruisers with full military capabilities. The rest were destroyers and escorts designed to project power without appearing overly aggressive. She kept her main battle group in reserve several systems away, but ready to respond if humans proved unreasonable. Sub-Commander Vextal commanded one of the escort destroyers and looked forward to seeing human reactions to proper military vessels. He expected the primitive ships to look pathetic next to sleek Kethver designs with their energy shields and plasma weapon arrays. The technological gap would make negotiations much easier. Dr. Hethwin accompanied the fleet aboard the science vessel to study human technology more closely. She hoped to identify useful innovations that could be adapted for civilized use once humans became proper tributaries. Even primitive species occasionally developed interesting solutions to basic problems. The humans arrived precisely on schedule with what appeared to be their entire military fleet. 30 vessels approached the meeting point in loose formation, showing reasonable discipline for such inexperienced crews. The ships looked exactly like the converted mining platforms and cargo haulers that aliens had observed during earlier encounters. Captain Steve Walsh commanded one of the larger human vessels, while Captain Maria Santos led a squadron of smaller escorts. Captain Dan Cooper brought up the rear guard with ships that looked particularly worn and outdated. The entire human fleet seemed barely capable of interstellar travel, let alone military operations. Morrison opened negotiations aboard his flagship, while the 2 fleets maintained careful distance from each other. He welcomed Zixthara to human space and expressed gratitude for Kethver's willingness to establish formal diplomatic relations. His words suggested he understood the importance of this moment for his species. Zixthara presented standard protection treaties that had been used successfully with dozens of primitive species. The documents offered Kethver military protection and technological assistance in exchange for exclusive trading rights and territorial access. The terms were generous considering human weakness and inexperience. The human captain studied the treaties carefully with his legal advisors before responding. Morrison noted several concerns about sovereignty and self-determination that suggested humans had unrealistic expectations about their bargaining position. He proposed alternative agreements based on genuine mutual cooperation between equals. Vextal found human naivety both amusing and irritating. These primitive beings actually believed they could negotiate as equals with a superior galactic civilization. Their mining ships and kinetic weapons gave them no leverage whatsoever, yet they acted like they had meaningful choices in this situation. Dr. Hethwin observed human behavior during negotiations with scientific interest. The crew members seemed remarkably calm for people facing such overwhelming technological disadvantage. Most species showed signs of stress or fear when confronted with superior firepower, but humans appeared almost relaxed. Morrison politely declined the protection treaties and insisted on arrangements that preserved human independence. He acknowledged Kethver technological superiority, but maintained that partnership should benefit both species equally. His reasonable tone made his unreasonable position even more frustrating. Zixthara tried patience and diplomacy for several hours before finally explaining reality to the stubborn humans. She described what had happened to other species, who refused reasonable protection offers and emphasized how dangerous the galaxy could be for inexperienced travelers. Her warnings carried clear implications. The human captain listened carefully to Zixthara threats before responding with apparent sadness that negotiations had reached this point. Morrison said he had hoped for genuine friendship between their species but understood that some civilizations preferred dominance over cooperation. He formally terminated diplomatic discussions. As talks broke down, both fleets began moving into positions that suggested preparation for conflict. Zixthara ordered her ships to demonstrate their superior capabilities by charging weapons and raising shields. The display should convince humans to reconsider their foolish rejection of generous terms. Human vessels responded by powering up their primitive kinetic weapons and arranging themselves in defensive formations. The 30 ships spread out to maximize their field of fire while maintaining communication links between units. Their coordination was impressive, even if their weapons were useless. Vextal eagerly anticipated the brief combat demonstration that would end human resistance. His destroyer alone carried enough firepower to cripple half the human fleet, while their metal-throwing devices could not even scratch Kethver energy shields. This would be education rather than actual warfare. Dr. Hethwin prepared her sensors to record the engagement for later analysis. The data would help understand how kinetic weapons performed against modern defenses and might provide insights into human tactical thinking. Even failed attacks could yield useful scientific information. Zixthara was about to order a warning shot when her tactical officer reported massive sensor contacts appearing throughout the surrounding space. Long-range scanners detected ships emerging from what had appeared to be empty vacuum. The contacts multiplied rapidly as more vessels became visible. The 30 human ships at the negotiation site had not been their entire fleet but rather bait for an elaborate trap. Hidden throughout the region, powered down, and invisible to conventional sensors were over 200 additional human vessels. Each ship activated simultaneously, creating a sphere of enemies around the surprised Kethver force. Captain Karen Hayes commanded one group of concealed ships while Captain Troy Bennett led another squadron that had been hiding behind false sensor shadows. The human fleet was not a collection of converted civilian vessels, but a carefully planned military operation designed to look primitive and harmless. Commander Amy Nelson coordinated the encirclement from her position aboard a ship that had pretended to be a simple cargo hauler. The vessel shed false external plating to reveal weapon arrays and targeting systems that were far more sophisticated than anything aliens had observed during earlier encounters. Zixthara realized with growing horror that everything she thought she knew about human capabilities had been carefully crafted deception. The mining demonstration, the honest discussions about primitive technology, and the apparent weakness of their fleet had all been lies designed to lure Kethver ships into a kill zone. The trap was perfect and completely unexpected. No civilized species used such elaborate deception in warfare, preferring direct confrontation between military forces. The idea that primitives would lie about their capabilities had never occurred to experienced galactic warriors who valued honor in combat. Subcommander Vextal frantically calculated firing solutions while Dr. Hethwin tried to analyze the new sensor data, but both officers realized their 12 ships were hopelessly outnumbered and surrounded by enemies whose true capabilities remained unknown. The humans had turned the tables completely. The human attack began without warning or ceremony as 200 ships opened fire simultaneously with their kinetic weapons. But these were not the simple mining charges that aliens had observed during the earlier demonstration. The projectiles that streaked through space were specially designed military ammunition moving at tremendous velocity. Commander Karen Hayes coordinated the first volley from her flagship while Captain Troy Bennett controlled targeting solutions for his squadron. The humans had calculated firing angles and impact vectors with mathematical precision, ensuring maximum effectiveness against Kethver defensive systems. Every shot had a specific purpose and target. Zixthara ordered immediate shield activation as dense tungsten slugs approached her fleet at significant fractions of light speed. The energy barriers sprang to life around each Kethver vessel, creating The familiar blue glow that had protected her people through countless battles. No kinetic weapon should be able to penetrate such advanced defenses, Sub-Commander. Vextel watched confidently as the first human projectiles struck his destroyer shields. The energy barriers were designed to disperse incoming force across wide areas until the impact energy dissipated harmlessly into space. Plasma bolts and particle beams had never breached Kethver shields, and primitive metal chunks certainly could not succeed where advanced weapons failed, but something was wrong with the impact patterns. Instead of dispersing harmlessly, the kinetic energy from human projectiles transferred directly into the shield generators with devastating efficiency. The tungsten slugs, each weighing several tons and moving at incredible velocity, carried momentum that could not be dispersed or redirected. Dr. Hethwin realized the terrible mistake in Kethver tactical thinking as her instruments recorded shield system failures across the fleet. Energy weapons created force that could be spread and dissipated, but kinetic weapons transferred mass and momentum that had to go somewhere. The shields were absorbing impacts they were never designed to handle. Captain Morrison had explained during negotiations that humans preferred simple solutions to complex problems. His people had studied galactic warfare and deliberately chosen weapons that exploited weaknesses in common defensive systems. While everyone else perfected energy-based combat, humans had perfected the ancient art of throwing rocks. The second volley arrived before Kethver commanders could adjust their defensive strategies. Human ships had fired in carefully timed sequences, ensuring continuous bombardment that gave alien shields no time to recover between impacts. The coordinated assault demonstrated tactical sophistication that contradicted everything aliens believed about human capabilities. Vextel watched in horror as his destroyer shields flickered and died under the relentless kinetic bombardment. Warning alarms screamed throughout his ship as overloaded generators exploded and protective barriers collapsed. The primitive weapons that should have been useless were systematically destroying his vessel defenses. Captain Steve Walsh led another wave of human ships in precise formation while Captain Maria Santos coordinated targeting data between squadrons. The humans fought with discipline and coordination that rivaled the best galactic military units. Their apparently converted civilian vessels maneuvered like purpose-built warships. Zixthara tried to return fire with her plasma cannon arrays, but discovered another advantage of human tactics. The kinetic projectiles were too small and fast for conventional targeting systems designed to track large energy signatures. Her computers could not lock onto tungsten slugs moving through space at tremendous speed. The human ships themselves proved equally difficult to target effectively. They used unpredictable maneuvering patterns and electronic countermeasures that confused Kethver sensors. What had appeared to be primitive technology during earlier encounters was actually sophisticated camouflage hiding advanced military systems. Dr. Hethwin frantically analyzed the battle data, trying to understand how human weapons achieve such devastating results. The kinetic projectiles were not just chunks of metal, but precisely engineered ammunition designed to transfer maximum momentum to specific target types. Each slug was a masterpiece of physics and engineering. Captain Don Cooper commanded one group of human vessels that had disguised themselves as damaged cargo ships during the approach to negotiations. His squadron shed false hull plating to reveal weapon systems that were far more advanced than anything aliens had observed. The deception had been perfect and complete. Commander Amy Nelson coordinated fleet-wide communications while Rick Turner provided targeting solutions for the continuing bombardment. The humans fought as a unified force, with each ship knowing exactly where to be and when to fire. Their tactical coordination surpassed anything Zixthara had seen from civilized military forces. The third volley from human kinetic weapons finished the job on most Kethver shield systems. One by one, the energy barriers that had protected alien ships for centuries collapsed under impacts they could not handle. The vessels found themselves naked and vulnerable to weapons they had dismissed as primitive and harmless. Zixthara flagship shuddered under direct hits as tungsten slugs punched through her hull armor with ease. The projectiles that had seemed So slow during mining demonstrations were actually moving fast enough to penetrate advanced military materials. Human weapons were not primitive, but brilliantly adapted to their intended purpose. Sub-Commander Vextel tried desperately to maneuver his crippled destroyer away from the killing zone, but human ships anticipated every move. Captain Troy Bennett Squadron had positioned themselves to cut off escape routes while other human units maintained continuous fire on disabled targets. The trap was closing with mathematical precision. Dr. Hethwin realized that humans had not just copied ancient kinetic weapons, but had perfected them using modern technology and tactical theory. Each projectile carried exactly the right amount of mass and velocity to overwhelm specific defensive systems. The weapons were not dumb, but incredibly smart in their simplicity. The battle lasted only minutes, because Kethver ships had no effective defense against weapons they had never encountered in modern warfare. Energy shields that could stop antimatter torpedoes crumpled under tungsten slugs moving at relativistic speeds. Armor that could deflect plasma beams was punched through by simple kinetic force. Captain Morrison broadcast surrender terms to the surviving alien vessels while human ships maintained firing positions around the crippled fleet. His offer was generous considering the circumstances, but made clear that further resistance would result in complete destruction. The humans had proven their point about the effectiveness of primitive weapons. Zixthara accepted surrender with the bitter knowledge that her people had been completely outmaneuvered by a species they had dismissed as backward and harmless. The humans had not just won a battle, but had revolutionized her understanding of warfare itself. Sometimes the oldest weapons were the most effective, especially when everyone else had forgotten why they worked. The surviving Kethver ships powered down their remaining weapons and prepared to be boarded by human marines. Vextel sat in stunned silence as his destroyer was secured by soldiers, carrying kinetic rifles that looked primitive but had proven devastatingly effective. The galaxy would never look the same again. The aftermath of battle brought an eerie quiet to the region of space where two fleets had met for negotiations. Human ships moved carefully through the debris field, conducting rescue operations for Kethver survivors while maintaining security around captured vessels. The efficiency of their post-combat procedures showed the same professional competence they had displayed during the fighting. Captain Morrison personally visited Commander Zixthara aboard her damaged flagship to ensure proper treatment of wounded aliens and discuss terms for the release of prisoners. His manner remained polite and respectful despite his complete tactical victory. The human captain seemed genuinely concerned about alien casualties and worked to minimize further suffering. Zixthara found herself studying Morrison with new eyes as he coordinated medical assistance for her injured crew members. This was not the primitive leader she had expected to dominate through superior technology. Morrison displayed the confidence and competence of an experienced military commander who understood both warfare and diplomacy. Dr. Helen Ross accompanied Morrison during his visit to explain the scientific principles behind human weapons technology. She spoke with Dr. Hethwin about the physics of kinetic energy transfer and momentum conservation that made simple projectiles so effective against energy-based defensive systems. Her explanation was both educational and slightly apologetic. The human scientist described how her people had analyzed galactic military doctrines and identified fundamental weaknesses in common defensive strategies. While civilized species perfected energy weapons that could be countered by energy shields, humans had chosen to exploit the basic physics that made kinetic weapons effective. Throughout history, Commander Vextel listened from his medical bed, as Ross explained that human projectiles were not random chunks of metal, but precisely engineered ammunition. Each tungsten slug was designed with specific mass and velocity characteristics to maximize momentum transfer against known shield frequencies and armor compositions. The weapons were brilliantly simple rather than simply primitive. Captain Morrison revealed that human mining demonstrations had been carefully staged performances, designed to mislead alien observers about true military capabilities. The kinetic impactors used for asteroid processing were real, but represented only the most basic application of human weapons technology. Military versions were far more sophisticated and deadly. Dr. Ross shared her analysis of HFY defensive systems gathered during the staged mining operations. Human sensors had recorded shield frequencies, energy patterns, and structural specifications, while aliens watched what they thought was primitive rock breaking. Every moment of contact had been intelligence gathering disguised as friendly cooperation. Zixthara began to understand the scope of human deception as Morrison explained their strategic thinking. His people had observed how galactic civilizations conducted warfare and deliberately chosen alternative approaches that would surprise and confuse traditional military thinking. The humans had fought an entirely different kind of war, Commander. Amy Nelson provided tactical analysis of the battle while overseeing prisoner processing and ship salvage operations. She described how human fleet coordination had been practiced for months using scenarios based on intelligence gathered during first contact. Every aspect of the engagement had been planned and rehearsed. Captain Steve Walsh commanded the security teams that were ensuring alien cooperation, while Captain Maria Santos coordinated medical assistance for wounded HFY personnel. The humans treated their defeated enemies with professional courtesy that impressed even hostile alien observers. There was no cruelty or revenge in human behavior. Dr. Hethwin found herself fascinated by human engineering philosophy as Ross continued her explanation of kinetic weapons design. Instead of pursuing the most advanced possible technology, humans had chosen the most effective approach for their specific needs. They had weaponized physics itself rather than trying to overcome it. The conversation revealed that humans had spent considerable time studying failed alien military engagements to understand why energy-based warfare had become dominant. They discovered that while energy weapons offered certain advantages, they also created predictable defensive responses that could be exploited by unconventional tactics. Morrison explained that humanity had deliberately maintained the appearance of technological primitiveness to avoid attracting premature attention from galactic powers. His people needed time to develop their industrial base and military capabilities without interference from species who might view humans as a potential threat. The strategic deception had worked perfectly because it played into alien assumptions about technological development. Civilized species expected primitive races to copy advanced galactic technology rather than developing independent solutions to military problems. Human weapons seemed too simple to be effective against modern defenses. Captain Troy Bennett led the technical teams that were studying HFY ship designs to better understand galactic engineering approaches. The humans showed genuine interest in alien technology while making clear they would not simply copy what others had developed. They preferred to create their own solutions to technical challenges. Zixthara realized that humans represented something entirely new in galactic politics. Most species either joined existing power structures or were absorbed by them. Humans had chosen a third option by developing capabilities that made them impossible to ignore or easily defeat. They had earned respect through strength rather than seeking protection through submission. The prisoner release negotiations proceeded smoothly as Morrison offered generous terms that would allow HFY survivors to return home safely. He asked only that they carry an accurate report of human capabilities to their leadership and relay humanity desire for peaceful coexistence based on mutual respect rather than dominance. Dr. Ross provided Hethwin with technical specifications for human kinetic weapons as a gesture of scientific cooperation. The data showed exactly how the weapons worked and why they were effective against energy shields. The information was both educational and served as a warning about the futility of conventional defenses. Subcommander Vextall struggled to accept that his sophisticated military education had been completely wrong about primitive weapons technology. The humans had not just defeated his ships but had shattered his fundamental assumptions about how modern warfare should be conducted. Everything he thought he knew needed to be reconsidered. Captain Morrison concluded his visit by expressing hoped that future meetings between humans and Kethver could be conducted under more peaceful circumstances. He emphasized that humanity sought friendship and trade rather than conquest or domination. The humans had proven their strength, and now offered genuine cooperation. As alien survivors prepared to depart in their remaining ships, Zixthara carried with her a completely changed understanding of the species she had expected to easily dominate. The humans had taught her people a valuable lesson about the danger of assumptions and the effectiveness of unconventional thinking. The news of human victory would spread throughout galactic civilization, carrying word of a new power that could not be dismissed or easily categorized. Other species would study human tactics and try to understand how such apparently primitive weapons had defeated advanced military technology. The galaxy had gained a new player who refused to follow established rules. Morrison watched the alien ships depart while his crews began salvage operations and damage assessment. The first test of human military capability had succeeded beyond expectations, but he knew this was only the beginning of a longer struggle for recognition and respect among galactic powers. Humanity had announced its presence in the most effective way possible by proving that different approaches to old problems could still surprise and defeat conventional wisdom.